everybody. Welcome to another episode of Allure of the Poor, sponsored by Dracaena Wines. I am your host, Lori, UC Davis graduate, WSET, Champagne specialist, Cote d'Aron, and studying for a Spanish wine scholar still. And I am so happy to have somebody that I call a friend and a colleague and just an all around amazing person as my guest today, Kathleen Willcox. So, welcome.
I'm so happy to be here. How are you?
I am doing well. I am doing well. I'm so happy that we got to be able to do this. And it's been, we get to see face to face
Me too.
as a little replacement for in real life, but, kind of just through the computer in real life.
Exactly. We'll take it.
Yes. So before we get into the interview, honestly, really the most important thing is always what's in our glass. So what are you sipping on tonight?
I have a Mariah Vineyards Zinfandel from 2016, and I actually went there to visit them a few weeks ago, and they are in the Anderson Valley, way up on a mountain, and it's a beautiful, such a unique place, and it kind of represents everything. I wanted to drink it tonight because it represents so much about what I am passionate about in wine. They're actually the first land to market certified winery. And that means basically, I mean, it was it was established by the Savoy Institute, that certification. So it's very new to the wine world. But like Patagonia, Timberland, there are all of these really big other, corporations who work in agriculture or with some form of, I mean, Timberland, and actually while I was at Mariah, I learned that Timberland and Patagonia are collaborating on using the full animal. So basically the skin of the cow will end up on boots, and then in Patagonia, or maybe it's not Patagonia, but it's one of the companies, they'll use the meat. So it's basically the very regenerative agriculture and kind of full circle just production. And I really loved the family. I went to visit. They were so passionate, and the wine is fantastic. So it's like all the things.
Win-win.
Yeah.
That is awesome. That is awesome. So that's kind of like taking farm to table, on, for lack of a better word, on steroids.
Exactly.
Making it every single thing, every single part of that animal being used so that there's absolutely no waste.
Right. And it's the same thing with the wine. They're making sure that everything is they take kind of a data point set of the vineyard. So that they went in and they measured the soil's fertility to see how many microorganisms there were, and then they took another measurement a year later to see if they could be officially certified. And of course they were, because they'd met some of their goals that they'd come up with the certification process. So every year they're trying to improve. It's not like, oh, now you're certified and you're done. It's really getting better and better and better, which is, I mean, I find that inspiring. And I feel like that's where we need to be in the world of wine right now, and the world in general. I mean, it's a mess.
Right. Absolutely. I love that. I love the fact that more people are actually focusing in on, making, not just taking, but and like previously is like, okay, we're not going to take, but we're going to keep our wine, we're going to keep our area good for us.
Right.
But now it's like, no, good isn't good enough. Now we want to make it better. And we're not going to rest on our laurels that we did this last year and we're done. We're going to make it better and better and better.
Right. And that's, I mean, Jackson Family Wines, like the bigger wineries are doing it too. Their whole roadmap to Rooted for Good program, where they're trying to be carbon positive by 2050. I mean, there are large and small wine companies now that are really, really making an effort to improve the quality of the vineyard and the quality of their workers' lives. And we need that. We need that. And what's in your glass?
So I am drinking Albino Armani.
Lovely.
Pinot Grigio.
Very
And
nice.
it is lovely. And I don't want to speak out, but I am pretty confident they are sustainable
Yeah.
also from their
I feel like
DOC.
they are too. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's a pretty important feature of the DOC. So I would assume so also. But they are one of my favorite Pinot Grigios. I just think that they're every wine. I haven't had a wine from them that I've disliked.
I
It's
agree. They're
they're
great.
they're all wonderful. They all are wonderful. So I can raise a glass and say slancha and thank you for
Cheers.
coming on and
Thank
welcome.
you. Mm.
So there is so much to talk about with what you do. I read like your articles that you write and everything, and honestly, it blows my mind at how well you can keep on track and write all of these articles because like I start writing an article and then 50,000 things pop in my head and I'm like, "Oh, look, a squirrel." And then the article doesn't get written for a week later or whatever. And you are constantly writing, but it's not like you're pumping out. I'm going to compare you and forgive me, writing gods up there, but I'm going to say a name. So like Janet Ivanovich is an author that I don't know if you're familiar with, but I loved her books.
Right.
And she wrote like one for the money, two for this, three for that. And it was about a bounty hunter in New Jersey, but she was a female bounty hunter. And she was kind of like a hot mess. And it's a comedy type thing,
Right.
right? So I loved it because it took place in Jersey. A lot of the things that she was writing about, I knew. So it brought it in, you know, one, two, three was great. By the time she got to like 13, she was pumping these out like I think every 6 months. And they got old and they got
Mm.
repetitive. And it was like, oh my gosh, she's doing this again. Like it just, the quality of the writing to me dropped. Where you're writing and it's like, here's an article by Kathleen Willcox. Here's an article by Kathleen Willcox. Here's an article by Kathleen Willcox. But it never ceases to amaze me how beautiful you write, how in depth you write, and how you're able to like the stories you tell. I feel like I'm there. And like as you're talking about someplace, I feel like I'm there watching this or talking, viewing it for myself through your words.
Well, that
So,
is incredibly kind, and I really appreciate that. I mean, I am so passionate about telling stories and telling stories through experiencing things myself, like, going to Mariah Vineyards, and I had lunch with the family. It was a beautiful day. We really walked around the vineyard and spent a lot of time talking about that wine. And those are the kinds of experiences that inspire different levels of introspection, and you can really think about new stories and think of new things in a different way. Because one thing, and I'm sure that you can relate to this, winemakers do things all day every day that they think, oh, that's completely normal, but an outsider is like, oh my gosh, that is so cool, and they're so inspired by it. So I think that part of the key is that I do a lot of travel and I hear the stories and I'm interested. I think curiosity is really that's at the root of everything.
so I have a question when and this probably might be different depending on where you're going or what you're writing about. But so like when you visited the winery, did you already have a topic in mind of here's my title, this is what I want to write? Is that how you approach it, or does it change depending on what's going on? Or once you're there, you're like, here's my article. This is what I'm going to write about.
It's usually the latter. If I'm like, for example, I went to J Vineyards just very recently to experience a very cool dinner series that they're having called Shifting the Lens. And it's about inviting a more diverse group of people to the wine table and exploring different flavors. The dinner that I went to was Indian food. And, typically you would think, oh, a sweet wine. No, they did all very, very, very dry wines. It was Chef Preeti Mystery, and it was very inspiring. But that's the type of thing where I'll go and I'll say, well, obviously I'm going to write about this. But then other things will happen while I'm there. But most of the time I just go and just see what's going on and get to know the people. And then again, it's a lot of times what they think is the story isn't what I think the story is, because they think, and I think that I write a lot about sustainability. So people will think that I'm going to write a very general story about sustainability. But as you said, that would get really boring for everyone, including
Right.
me. So I often just find some little detail that I had no idea I'd find.
And so let's backtrack and let's find out, how did you actually fall in love with wine? How did you come to writing for wine? Because you write about a lot of things, like you're in other magazines and you're in other, online and everything. So how did you find wine?
Well, I started writing when I graduated from college, and I really struggled with what was going to kind of define my beat, for lack of a better term. I tried business writing, I tried writing for women's magazines, I tried music writing, and there was always a big something missing. And I have always loved wine, and I've always loved beer, and I've loved the culture of alcohol and food. So I just started exploring it. And I have to say that the wine industry is by far one of the most welcoming industries I found. I know not everyone feels that way, but I really felt like I was home. And I mean, there's everything there. There's business, the environment, there's culture, there's travel, there's personal stories. And that's what interests me. It's just, it happens to be in one subject, which I feel very lucky to have discovered it and to have stumbled into it during a time when wine is a welcoming place. And I've never felt, and every other industry that I've written about other than wine, this has not been the case. But if I don't know something, I don't feel like an idiot. I just ask the question, and it's okay. And people understand you can't know everything about wine because there's so much to know. So if you've got kind of a missing gap, people are excited to fill you in. They don't,
Right.
they're going to talk to you all day about it,
I-
which is
If
great.
if somebody comes up to me at an event or something and says, Cab Franc, I don't know Cab Franc. Oh my God, it's like it's like
Exactly.
my happy day. Well, let me tell you about Cab Franc.
Exactly. And I think I mean, winemakers and wine growers tend to be very passionate, and again, for lack of a better word, geeky intellectual people who get really excited about the particular area that they excel at.
So I
When
have a
did
question.
I
Go
mean,
ahead,
I'm
I'm
sorry
sorry.
I know I shouldn't ask questions, but I'm curious because I know that you've been such a big advocate for Cab Franc. When did you start discovering that yourself? Was it always, or?
No, so my husband and I were on a trip to Napa Sonoma, right? On a wine trip, and we walked into, this was before the winery, and we walked into William Harrison. And interestingly enough, I haven't put the dates together, but I think I just interviewed the winemaker Zeke Neely, who was the winemaker back then, at that time. But I have to put the dates together to make sure that it's right. But so we walked into William Harrison, and the person behind the counter said, she was pouring the wine, and then she's like, I have this extra bottle. Wine club members just came in, and so we opened it for them. It's not normally here. Do you want it? Do you want to taste it? And my husband and I looked at each other. We're like, well, yeah,
Of course,
I'm
right.
not going to say no to that. So she poured it, and we tasted it, and it was, if the lights can come shining down, and the songs start singing, and the birds chirping, it was like an enlightenment movement. Like, it was
That's
incredible.
awesome.
I tasted it, I was like, "This is the best wine I have ever had in my life." And I looked at my husband, and he's like, "Wow, this is really good." And we said, "Well, what is it?" And the person behind the counter, the girl behind the counter said, "Well, it's our Cabernet Franc." And I was like,
Wow.
"Oh my God, I don't even know what Cabernet Franc is, but I'm in love with it. Like
That's awesome.
this is beautiful." So we purchased a few bottles, and then we went on a mission, like literally searching for, because my husband is very analytical. He like started researching where we can buy Cab Franc, and we totally changed our entire trip that was remaining to wineries that made Cab Franc. And
Wow.
there actually weren't a lot back then.
Right.
There wasn't. And so that's how we fell in love with Cab Franc. And then for Dracaena Wines, why we focused on Cab Franc is, I tell the truth about it. You're in Paso, and we're this big, right? We're super tiny, and there's for Paso giants, right? We're not going to compete with the Zinfandels. I can't compete
Right.
against the Tobin James, against the J Duceys, and about, with that type of thing. And I don't want to do not that there's anything wrong with it, but I don't want to do a cab solve, right?
Right.
And
Right.
so what are we going to do? So on that realm, we're like, you know what? Let's pick our own little niche. Let's pick out something that is us, so we stand out. So that was kind of the business model. And then on the sidebar was, well, if nobody's going to drink it or buy it, we're going to have a lot of wine.
Right.
So we might as
Right.
well make something that we like. You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, luckily it got a 91 in Wine Enthusiast and sold out, and we've been
Mm.
selling out every vintage. So we don't really get to drink a lot of our own, but that's how it came about. This William Harrison Cab Franc just blew me away, and that's it. And then in terms of that, I just want to promote the grape because it's such an
Right.
underrated grape variety. So that's where I call myself the champion of Cab Franc. It's like let's promote this, let's promote this. So,
It's awesome.
it's a passion. You just fall in love with something, right?
Right. Right. And I think it really distinguishes you. So, and your winery, which
Yeah,
is wonderful. It's
thank
good for,
you.
that's the thing that I don't think all wineries understand is that if they have a hook, it doesn't matter how good you are, it doesn't matter how beautiful your label is, how sustainable you are, if no one's buying your wine. I mean, so I
Right.
think that that's a really, I don't know if that was part of your intention, probably not, but that is wonderful because people know you for that.
Yeah, that when I started Cab Franc Day, it was literally because we were just releasing our first Cab Franc. So
Right.
I started. I never would have thought that it would trend, and I would have never thought that it would be where it is today, where I've gotten to travel to Hungary and I've gotten to speak in front of communities about it. And I would have never, I would have never thought that. But I'm proud that that's where it is. So. Yeah.
I'm thrilled for you too.
Yeah. Well, thank you. But I'm going to turn the table back to you.
Okay. Okay.
So, your passion is sustainability,
Yes.
right? And so I think, can you explain what you define as sustainability? Because I think that there's some confusion between sustainability and maybe organic and some other terms that get thrown out there.
My definition is evolving. So I definitely prefer it if everyone is organic, but I also am a realist and I understand that not everyone and not every climate can be completely organic. And I also think that there is an argument that if you are in a climate that is really rough, spraying a lot of copper and a lot of the organic pesticides and fungicides and everything can be just as damaging, if not more so, than spraying once or twice a very not a harmful pest. I mean, because I'm not suggesting anyone sprays Roundup. I think that like there are some things that if it's outlawed in Europe, I really don't think Americans should be spraying it either.
Right.
We're not as strict as Europe, but I wish we were.
Right.
Um, but I also think that there's what we were talking about before. Let's say you're spraying Roundup in the vineyard. You are going to have very degraded soil. You're going to have weak grapes. So if you go from that to being biodynamic overnight, you're gonna, your yield is gonna be slashed by 2/3. You're gonna go broke. So I think that there is something to be said for steps, taking steps towards being more sustainable and just continuing to push yourself. I also think it's more than just in the vineyard. I was at a lunch today that was California Wine Institute. It was a virtual, and I call it lunch because it was 1 p.m. my time, but it was 10 a.m. Their time. And all of the wineries were talking about, building, some of them were working on lightening their bottles so that they reduce the carbon footprint for transportation. Some of them were building more eco-friendly wineries. Some of them were working on water filtration. So there are so many different ways. And I also think it's important to be economically sustainable, which goes into the whole like going from spraying Roundup to being biodynamic overnight isn't necessarily, unless you have a lot of trust fund money, then go for it. And also supporting employees because we all know what that's like. I mean, you don't get into the wine business to, become a millionaire,
Right.
basically. You get into it because you love doing what you're doing. And often that does entail some sacrifices. So I think it's important when winemakers take care of their employees and maybe give them vacation and sick days if they can, and just keep the conversation open and equitable.
Mm. And that's what I like the most about the whole concept of sustainability is that it's not a single entity.
Right.
It's, you start off with I forget what that diagram is called, but like it starts off with this and then it like rays out into all of the different arms, like an
Right.
octopus of everything. It's not just taking care of the soil. Taking care of the soil is extremely important. But taking care of the carbon footprint when you're trying to ship or when you're trying to do this, and most importantly the
Yes.
people and treating the people well and respecting them for what they do and rewarding them appropriately for the role that they have, no matter how trivial of a role it may seem. It's a huge role in the big picture if you want to make a quality wine that is that's well respected.
Absolutely. And one thing that I hear again and again from winemakers who are trying to become greener is they talk to the people in the cellar. They talk to the workers in the vineyard and they say, how can we do better? And all of a sudden they're realizing, okay, the people in the cellar are trying to save water, but we're having them wash out, the tanks in this way, which is totally not sustainable. So often talking to the people who are actually doing the work is you're going to come up with much better solutions together, and they're going to feel empowered
Mm.
and they're going to feel like they're a part of the solution, and then they're going to want to implement the changes even if it takes them more time.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. If you can include the people who are doing the work, because I don't think there's anybody who ever wants to be in a job that feels like nobody listens to them or, understands what they're going through. Like it's funny, as an educator, you joke, well, a teacher then becomes a principal and they totally forget all of the stuff that they had issues with when they were teaching because now they're principal or superintendent or something and they start doing things to the teachers that they would have hated if they were teachers.
That's
So
right.
you have to continuously be reminded of what it's like to be in whatever it is. And the people who are working in the cellar, they're the ones who best understand the cellar, and the people who
Absolutely.
are in the vineyard best understand the vineyard.
Yes, 100%.
Right.
And also, I think, and I know that this is something that is becoming bigger for everyone, is giving women opportunities and giving, LGBTQ people and giving people who might be differently abled access because, and, not just white people. Like let's not make it so white.
Right.
Um, because the wine industry is not going to grow if it's just a certain one type of person, because that's not right.
Right. Right. Absolutely. So part of it, the bottles. the bottles have driven me crazy since long before we owned the winery, and then more since we've owned the winery.
I can only imagine.
Like it drives me crazy. And I get there's certain wineries who shall not be named, believe that luxury means heavy bottle.
Yeah.
And I have always tried to preach nicely to my friends that bottle weight does not mean quality.
Right.
It means absolutely nothing. All that means quality is really what you're drinking in the bottle. Is it a good wine or is it not a good wine? Right? That's what the quality. How you get to that is a different story, but you either like what's in the bottle or you don't like what's in the bottle. It doesn't matter how heavy the bottle is. Right. And then I try to explain to them, if that bottle weighs so much money, all you're doing is really paying for it twice. Because,
Exactly.
right? Because that bottle costs more money, and today is even more insane with the bottle cost. But the bottle is so heavy that it's costing the winery more money to purchase that bottle. That cost of goods gets wrapped up into how much they're going to sell that bottle for. So the consumer is paying for that heavy glass. And then, unless you're picking it up at the winery, you're also paying to ship it to you.
Right.
And that heavier glass is significantly more expensive to ship than other glass. So I keep trying to tell the consumers you're paying for that twice, and it doesn't change what's in the bottle.
It doesn't. And, shipping is a real headache. I know that you get as many samples as I do. And I am sometimes really shocked by the organic wineries who are sending me things in styrofoam. I
Mm.
mean, and I actually just discovered, I did not know this, you can recycle styrofoam. So now I've got a pile of styrofoam in my basement.
Oh,
They're very specialized facilities. So you have to drop them off.
okay.
So I'm going to wait till I have enough to make it worth the car drive. So it is kind of ridiculous, but that was a fact that I learned. And I was so excited from the winemaker at Remy Wines told me that actually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Because I was babbling about styrofoam and she said, you can recycle it. And I looked it up and you can absolutely recycle it. So,
Wow. Well, so I'll share a little bit. Um, if I get a sample that's in styrofoam, and let's say it's a 2-pack or something,
right.
if we're going to ship out to Indrasina, if we're going to ship out, we will reuse that.
Well, that's good.
But
Yeah,
I write a note. This is how I
that's
write a note.
awesome.
I write a
So
hand
you're
note to
like,
the
this isn't what
person.
we're doing. Yeah,
Yeah, that
I'm
I
glad.
very specifically say we are we are very adamant about protecting the earth and recycling and doing everything. Please note this is a recycled shipper. We've received this from another winery, and we feel the best way to, help the environment is to pass it on. Please keep it and turn it into somebody else if you're going to send something, like
That's
pass
really
it on.
smart. Yeah,
So that's what we do if we get styrofoam.
that's
But
a
I
good,
didn't know
that's
you
a
can
good idea.
recycle it.
Yeah, I don't think anyone knows that. I mean, my husband works for the DEC and he didn't know and he was really surprised. So I let's spread the word.
Yes, I'll have
Well,
to look up where a local place is for us to how far it is for us to find a place that recycles styrofoam.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. We completely, I mean, we never used styrofoam ever, but
Oh,
I
God.
I just I just feel if I have it and if somebody ships it to me,
Oh,
I'd rather
yeah.
reuse it than, you know, but I don't know. I guess, the styrofoam works kind of now in the summer months.
Yes.
Because
Agreed.
you can put the ice pack and, it's
Right.
got, so I get it there. But when it's not the summer, I don't get why people are using it. But now that I know you can recycle it, I will definitely look for a place that you can.
Right. Because, well,
Right.
you're getting more. You know you're getting more.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So back to sustainability, you were part of writing the slow wine guide.
Yes.
And I do not have this year's book, but I do have previous books. And I've had the opportunity. I happened to be in New Jersey when Slow Wine was traveling through New York
Oh, cool.
a few months ago. I don't
Yes,
know, time flies.
I
And I
know.
was able to go to the event. But can you explain what slow wine is and why you feel it's an important aspect?
Sure. So slow wine is kind of an outgrowth of slow food, which was created in Italy. I can't tell you exactly when. I feel like it was the 1970s, but don't quote me on that. And basically, the whole premise is everything that we've been talking about. Just respecting the earth, not spraying a lot of chemicals on your food, eating and drinking locally, supporting your community, and it's a holistic kind of program. And so Slow Wine, I think, is a wonderful program. They're spreading, I mean, it's fairly new in the US, but it's becoming a bigger and bigger program everywhere. And basically what we do is we look, and I'm not involved this year because I have too many things going on, but every chapter, so I was part of the New York chapter, we'll go out and we'll send wineries. I mean, we'll call them and we'll say, would you like to participate in this? And basically, if they are not spraying chemicals, if they are doing the right thing in the cellar and in the vineyard, we include them in the book. And basically, it's a guide. So it's not, it's not a lot of creative writing, but it's really helpful for the consumer because you have a guide then of where to go in California, where to go in Oregon, Washington, all of most of the places where they make wine in the US that is organic. And it has a guide on you give awards for really excellent wine, you give awards for really eco-friendly wine, and you give awards for affordable wine. Like if it's affordable for what the QPR basically.
Right.
And it's a great opportunity to get to know wineries in your area because I don't know about you, but I feel like in some ways I travel and get to know wineries outside of New York much more than I do and it's a shame. So
Yeah.
I was really excited to have the opportunity to speak to like-minded folks in New York and just kind of take their temperature and find out what they were doing, what they were excited about. And ideally, the writers go out and visit the wineries. But with COVID, it wasn't always possible, so people did it on Zoom a lot, which works too.
Works what it does do.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like I view it as kind of like a tour guide for
Yes.
people as you're going to a region. If this is something that's important to you, which I'm hoping more and more and more people it is important to, right? That this is kind of like, all right, well, let me see. I can support winery A that I see in every magazine, that I see in every, you know, possible thing because of all the marketing, all that they have. Or let me look through here and maybe I can support a local place that really pays attention to sustainability and making sure that everything is done well for the environment and the people.
Absolutely. It's so inspiring. And I think that actually being involved in slow wine makes people really excited about what they're doing and they're excited to share the story. And then they know that they're going to be attracting visitors who are really passionate about not just wine, but about their values. And I think I mean, wine, we have what? Well over 10,000 brands now in the US, which is kind of hard to believe. And so a lot of times these brands are very specific and you can build kind of just like you have with Cab Franc, a cult following around either your identity, the grapes that you produce, or your values. So it's kind of another marketing tool. I mean, I hate to say that, but it is if wineries do want to get involved, I would definitely suggest. And as long as you're not as long as you're growing grapes organically and treating the vineyard correctly, and you can prove that and show that and talk about it, I would definitely recommend reaching out to Slow Wine and getting listed if you're not already involved.
And I do. I think if you're traveling, you can reach to the guide and you can say, okay, I'm here. Which
Right.
wineries do I want to support because they're doing things the right way?
Right. Like when I was in my 20s and I was backpacking, it would be, The Lonely Planet. And now
Right.
it's Slow Wine. So it's great.
That's
Evolves.
fantastic. I like that.
So it evolves. I don't know what's next. I'm kind of scared, but we'll see.
So while you're traveling, because as you mentioned, you travel quite a bit. And so I won't make you say your favorite place because that's just really, really difficult. And I understand that that's not a wise thing to say. But so where is one place that you visited that you were surprised by how incredible the region was? Versus like sometimes you have this mindset and then you get there and you're like, whoa, this is so much better than what I had in my mind, even though it was great in your mind.
Bordeaux, which,
Oh, okay.
I mean, how could it be? Like, I pictured the Disneyland version of Bordeaux. So I pictured the Grand Cru and the vast estates. And I mean, they were there and they're gorgeous. But there was also just such a hardcore scene that was so passionate about making wine that isn't super expensive. The
Mhm.
winemakers were opening up their homes to visitors. They let people camp in their vineyards. They have chicken all over. They have trees in the vineyards now. They have agroforestry in the vineyards to
Wow.
increase shade and to increase biodiversity. Like they're radical, which is not what I expected. I did not expect tattooed winemakers from,
Right? You expect the tie, the
yeah,
suit, and the
exactly.
right.
Yeah. And they were really cool. Like they were really rock and roll. And I mean, that is not what I expected in Bordeaux. So
Yeah.
that was, and the wine is phenomenal. I mean, it's Bordeaux.
So I will ask, do you prefer right or left bank?
It's so hard. I mean, it really depends on what I'm drinking. I'd say often right bank.
Okay.
What about you?
Well.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I when I walked when we visited Saint Emilion, I was flabbergasted. Like I was so like almost tears came. Like it was just so emotional for me to be there. And I can't really explain why. It just was so beautiful there. And I just everything, the buildings and the people walking around and the wineries that we visited in Saint Emilion, I just walked around and I was in awe. And that's not to say that because we visited all of the main areas and we tasted wines and everything was amazing when I was there. But there was just something about Saint Emilion that stole my heart.
I
Just
agree. I
just
mean,
stole
you
my heart.
really like the whole time I was there, and I mean, I was raised Catholic, but I'm not a big churchgoer. Um, it, but I felt like I was in the wine holy land, and I was just like, I'm here, and there was just such an amazing spirit of just beauty and appreciation for everything, and taking it easy and taking it slow. And I think as an American who really is kind of always in a rush, I'm always in a rush. It was really important for me to experience that. So it was cool.
Yeah, it really it was incredible. It was incredible. And now I'm going to ask, so is there a wine region that you like dream about and that you absolutely want to visit that you haven't visited yet?
There are so many. There's one on my list that I'm supposed to go to in the fall that I'm really excited about is South Africa. I mean,
Oh
it's
my gosh.
like bucket list dream. I am so excited and I am so inspired by the winemakers in South Africa and just how far they've come and the social change and just everything that they're doing is really inspiring. And I can't wait to taste it in person. But I mean, New Zealand, Australia, China. I'm very curious about China. They're doing some very interesting things over there with wine. I don't think there are going to be any press trips in my future to China, but but there are just so many places that are making wine now. And I mean, you mentioned Hungary before. That's another place that's just fascinating.
It's
That
beautiful.
yeah, I'm sure, and such an interesting history.
Yeah. When we were there, I actually, well, funny wise, so because we're all about the Weimaraner dog here, right? And in Hungary, there's a Vizsla, which is the cousin. It basically is a Hungarian Weimaraner, right? Except it's kind of rusty color versus the gray.
Oh,
And so when we found out we were going to Hungary, all I kept saying is, I can't wait to actually see a Hungarian Vizsla. I want
oh,
like this is like the stupid things that I do when I'm on trips, right?
right,
Like,
right.
I'm in Alaska and all I wanted to do was find a moose. Like
Ah,
these are the things, you
but
know,
yeah, I can relate.
right? So we were in Hungary for a week and didn't see a single Vizsla, not a single one. And I was so upset. And we were there the last day that we were there. We were in Vilnius and we were being hosted by Bach, and we were walking from there to the winery that we were going to start at. And it was our last day, and all of a sudden, this beautiful female Vishla came running across the street
Oh,
and came running up to me. And I'm like, the elusive Hungarian Vishla. She knew I needed to see
that's
her.
so sweet. I love it when that happens. And I feel like that happens on wine trips. You're just like, oh,
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
miraculous moment. That's wonderful.
Yeah. So I was so happy. We have loads of pictures with the Vishla.
Did your
And
husband go too?
yes,
Oh,
yeah.
that's
They
awesome.
they they brought both of us over to so they do their grape variety is Cab Franc. That's what they're resting their laurels on. And they were doing a symposium called Franc and Franc.
Oh, how
And
cool.
they brought us over for me to talk about Cab Franc Day and how to promote Cabernet Franc as itself. And they brought him as a winemaker and to discuss Cab Franc in California and how it's emerging and how we literally science wise how we make it and things like that.
That's really cool.
So we brought Dracaena Wines was over and they wanted another winery, so we reached out to Lang and Reed,
Oh,
and
cool.
yeah, and we brought their wine with us over there, and we poured at the symposium.
I love Lang and Reed.
Yeah,
They've got some good stuff.
yeah,
Do
they do.
you and again and I'll stop asking questions, but are you friends and kind of colleagues and do blind tastings with some of the winemakers in your area, or is that because I know some places it's more of a thing than others?
It is a big thing in Paso. There are groups in Paso, but we don't actually we're just starting to kind of migrate to living in
Right,
Paso.
right,
But
right.
yeah, so it is kind of a thing, and I can't wait to start doing that officially. There was a Nita from LXV was talking, and they host these things, and they were just doing a Syrah one for all these people. And I was like, oh, that's so cool. But I have, now what we do is we'll go to places and we'll meet with the winemaker that's for that winery, and then we'll pour our Cab Franc and we talk about it. But
Right.
we haven't participated in an actual group one, but I can't wait to, when we're officially living there, it will happen.
Yeah,
It
absolutely.
will
That's
happen.
exciting.
Um, but Hungary, you'd love it. It's absolutely beautiful there. And so much history. And the thing that blew my mind, and this is just my stupidity, or lack of understanding outside the United States. Um, the revolution, quotes revolution that
Right.
occurred there, and the whole Russian thing coming in and everything. Like in my head, I knew about it, But in my head, that was so, so long ago.
Right.
And, when we visited you're talking like 30 years ago this happened.
Right.
Like I
Right.
was alive when this happened.
Yeah.
And that hit me very strongly about how these people have fought through this. And we walked past buildings and there were gunshot holes in the buildings. And we went into the museum, the underground museum that talked about what happened in the square. And you walk past the river and there's the bronze shoes that represents the people. And like I that I that's what I love about travel, because we don't have that here. We're so new, and I know that happened, like 30 years ago, but they're so rich in their traditions in other countries. They respect their history, I think, more so than we do here.
Yeah, and I think they've been through, I mean, although the last few years politically have been very traumatic. So maybe we'll look back on this as kind of a really big time of upheaval. But I feel like in Europe, I mean, I remember when the pandemic hit, I would speak to European winemakers versus American winemakers, and European winemakers were almost like they weren't laughing about it, they were taking it seriously, but they were saying, look, we've been through multiple depressions, multiple wars, world wars. I mean, we've
Right.
been bombed. We've been ruled over by dictators. And yeah, they emerge unscathed, and they expected to emerge unscathed from COVID too. And of course, they did. And I think you're right. They have a real long view that I think we lack here.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's one of the reasons why I love traveling, to just see and hear their stories. I was crying in Hungary well, first I was laughing, crying, but the we were tasting another wine, another Cab Franc at a dinner, and the owner, winemaker, was sitting right next to me, spoke zero English. And I, of course, spoke no Hungarian.
Right.
And so tasted his wine, and it was so good. It was such a good wine. I took out my phone, I went to Google Translate, I typed in what I wanted to say about his wine, translated it into Hungarian, or Google translated it into Hungarian, and I handed him my phone. Right.
Oh, that is so great.
And he read it, and he was like, he was so excited that, like, this is what I thought of his wine. And I'm like really a nobody, but okay, I'm glad whatever. But he was
Right.
so happy that I enjoyed his wine. He starts hitting his wife next to him, you know,
Oh,
and she's in a conversation and she's like, whatever. And keeps hitting her. She turns, she's like, what? What I'm assuming was what, right?
right.
And he hands her my phone, and she
Oh,
reads it, and she just stops the conversation. And then luckily another person who was on the trip could translate for us.
right.
And he told us what they were saying. And it was such a great moment to talk to these winemakers, and for to let them know that their stuff was appreciated. It was so incredible. um and
That's why
then
we're in this business, right? Those moments.
what?
That's why we're in this business, those
Yeah.
moments, because
Yeah.
it brings you so much closer to someone who is really practically so far away from your everyday life. It's really cool.
Right, right. And then I'm going to wrap that back to you in terms of my previous question of knowing what you want to write about or whatever. Like, I know that sometimes I'm sitting at an event or whatever, and I kind of have in my head what it's going to be. And then all of a sudden, I'm like, ding, like they say something, and I'm like, no, that's what I'm going to write about.
Exactly. Exactly. Because I mean, if I'm going to a certain region, of course, I'll do some reading and research and I'll think, okay, generally these are the topics. But sometimes it's just not even close to what I end up writing about, which is great.
Yeah, yeah. Because I think there's a story, and then there's the story that's under the story.
Yes. And that's often the the marketing team doesn't always know what the winemaker is going to say, which can be good and can be bad, can be bad.
Right.
But sometimes they don't even know the full. the full extent of what, the winemaker is doing, because they just don't talk about it because they don't think it's relevant. They just think it's, oh, of course I do, I do this in the vineyard. Of course I do. I plant these esoteric cover crops. But really, to anyone else, it's fascinating.
Right. Right. Absolutely. So if sustainability is your top, this is really your heart, soul, this is what else piques your interest about wine? What else do you love about wine?
I like learning about the business of wine, which is not, it sounds really dry, but I think that that is fascinating. Like, what I just wrote an article for Wine Industry Advisor about the sales trends. So basically, rosé is doing really well online and in tasting rooms. Other grapes and variety, and of course it is spring, but other grapes and varieties aren't really selling except at events where, people are so excited to be there, and like you say, that's when they get to try the wine, that the Cab Franc that you'd never tried before, and then they, become lovers of it forever, and they buy a case or whatever. um but so I'm interested in also the demographics, who's buying what, why, and trying to understand what that says more broadly about wine and just the world and what's happening. Because often the way people choose to spend money says a lot about things that are happening in their hearts and, broadly in in the bank. I mean, luxury wine is way up because people who have cash to spend, 100 plus dollars on wine aren't hurt right now. But for people who spend 15, $20 on wine, they might not be spending that money on wine. They might be spending it on gas. And,
Right.
so
That's an amazing point because like right now, cash is worthless. So those people who have a lot of it are looking to spend it however they possibly can, and they're not being harmed by anything. And you're right, those who are stretching for that $15, $20 bottle of wine right now need to put it towards, something else so that they can survive.
exactly.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Wow. And so also you have a whole other sidebar. I don't know how you find the time, but outside the bottle,
Yes, thinking outside the bottle. So that's with Robin Shreves.
who
She's
I adore.
I
I
know.
adore.
She's a dear friend and a colleague now, and we launched it with the goal of turning it into a writing outlet, which we've actually kind of let up on. We're doing less posting of independent articles, but we do have clients, and we work together on crafting content for them, and it's been really fun. And it feels sometimes as a writer a little bit lonely, especially if you're not in a part of a publication. So it's really nice. Today we were just texting back and forth about just stupid things, like, oh, this is annoying. Oh, this, my child did this. So you just have someone to like. It's like a water cooler type of
Right.
situation too, and it's nice.
And so you're doing marketing for
Well,
businesses? Like it, what?
yeah. So basically, if a winery, and we're very reasonably priced, unsurprisingly, because we're used to getting paid as writers, not as PR people. So basically, if people don't have the budget to do like a full blown massive PR campaign, but they still want experienced writers who know what they're doing and kind of know how to craft copy, we'll help them with that.
Okay,
It's
excellent.
been fun.
And And so where can people like find you to follow you? Like how can can they sign up so that they get blasted when you write one of your amazing articles?
Well, the best way to follow me is on Instagram. So at Kathleen Willcox with two L's on Instagram. And I usually publish all of my pieces on Instagram. I try to.
Okay.
So that's
And,
that's way.
and but you don't actually have,
I don't.
yeah, an actual website, no. And but they can follow Thinking Outside the Bottle also, correct?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Absolutely. So I am so like I said at the beginning, you blow my mind with how much you write and how well you write. And I literally read your articles and I'm like, that is so well read. That I mean written. That is so well written. And that is so I aspire to like I read your stuff to try to learn. I'm not gonna
Well, that's why
uh,
we all do it. I really enjoyed your piece on Texas and in
oh, thank you.
yeah, that was great. Yeah. I mean, I love reading my friends and my colleagues' pieces, and I always learn something. It's a cool, we're very lucky to have such a great group of fellow writers and colleagues because, again, you can't, there's not one publication or one writer who can cover it all. So it's great to just read widely, I think.
Right. And it's for the most part, it's a very nice community. People
Yes.
are very open. People are very willing to help each other. And and that I think correlates also to the wine world. I mean, that's one of the things that we love about Paso so much is if we have a question, that we don't know the answer to or whatever, you just reach out to another winemaker in Paso and they're more than happy to help. Here you go, this is what you do. Like, oh yeah, this happened to me 5 vintages ago. This is what you do, and that's what, community is about. And I think it's wonderful.
Absolutely. Paso's a great place. I need to get back there.
Yes, you do. Yes, you
I'll
do.
visit you.
Yes, absolutely. And you can stay. We have the condo now, so you can even stay with
Nice.
us.
Awesome.
But I would love to show you the places we go. The
Yeah, I
little
would
the
love
little
that.
little wineries in the nooks and crannies of Paso that we
Yeah,
love going to.
that would be
So
wonderful.
yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on and taking an hour out of your very, very busy schedule. And I
Thank you.
appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
And for everything you've done for me, I appreciate it also. And so I will raise my glass again and say thank you for joining me and
Cheers to
Sancha.
you. And it's right back at you.
Oh, thank
Thank you.
you. Thank you.
Cheers.
Cheers.